But I think that would be maybe the more common difference, is that the youth organization in general is seen as the more radical in those stances. But of course, we do have also our certain political differences, whether it be about, I don't know, legalization of cannabis, for example, which we support, but the party does not, or the membership of Finland in NATO, which the Left Alliance Party has come to support. Yet in the Left Youth, in our political program, we still say that Finland should actually leave NATO.
Welcome back to another episode of the Left Agora. My name is Akif, and today I'm joined by Pinja Vuorinen from Finland, the chairperson of Vasemmistonuoret, known in English as the Left Youth. She has held this position since 2022. The Left Youth is a Finnish political youth organization which closely collaborates with the Finnish left-wing party, the Left Alliance, Vasemmistoliitto. This is actually my second interview with a chairperson of a left-wing youth organization and my third conversation with a Finnish political figure on this channel. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, be sure to check them out. My conversation with Vuorinen was genuinely inspiring. As someone who believes deeply in the transformative power of youth organizations, I was especially glad to speak with another young leader working for meaningful change. Let's dive in. Here is my interview with Pinja Vuorinen. The youth organization you currently chair, the Left Youth, was founded in 1944, if I'm not mistaken, as a political youth movement. It works closely with Finland's major left-wing party, the Left Alliance, Vasemmistoliitto. For those who might not be familiar with the landscape of Finnish left-wing politics, could you start by explaining what the Left Youth is and how it operates today, and how does the group connect with the Left Alliance?
Yes, so the Left Youth is an independent political youth organization, but we do the youth work of the Left Alliance Party by our own decision. So we do have our own political program. We do have like our own membership registration. So not all of our members are members of the party, for example. So we are independent in that sense. But we also have like a formal role in the Left Alliance Party, in the sense that we can send a delegate to the party congress that has a right to vote in the congress, as well
Yeah,
as a right to nominate a member to the party council that meets up twice a year to decide on party topics. And we also have a right to send one delegate there that also has a right to vote in these issues. But other than that, we of course cooperate on issues like elections and such, but we have our independent platforms and programs. And yes, as you mentioned, our organization is now over 80 years old.
yeah.
We just had our 80th birthday last year and had a great party for that. But actually, the Left Alliance Party is only 30 years old, 35 years old now. So we are actually older than the party we are doing
y-
the work
Yeah,
for. But as for how the Left Youth operates, so we are like an umbrella organizations for all those young people who share our agenda. Our main base is that we are our ideological viewpoint is that we stand for democratic, ecological, feminist, and international socialism. And then we also work within like parliamentary and extra parliamentary means, whether it be running candidates in elections, whether it be like a national election or student body elections, but also organizing demonstrations, cooperating with grassroots actors. We organize our own camps, seminars, and so on. And also on the, of course, a lot of work is done on the local level, where
yeah.
local Left Youth members come together and arrange their own meetings and their own programs. And the organization hosts our congress every 2 years, where we are choosing the people to lead the organization. In between congresses, we are deciding on topics that we are going to focus on during the next 2 years. And depending on the year, we also, of course, vote on the political program, for example.
Yeah, yeah. And each organization actually has its own dynamics, certainly. But does your organization, does your youth organization differ from, for example, the Left Alliance in terms of ideology or, depending on the context, policy preferences? Or is it always following the same policy lines?
Certainly not in the sense that we are not obligated in any way. We are independent in our own decisions. Of course, we do share a lot of similar views in which
Yeah.
ways our policies should go, but I think it's quite a typical dynamic where the youth organization tend to be a bit more radical, one might say, and I think that also applies to us. Of course, I don't know if it necessarily is radical what we are doing. I think we are the ones that dare to speak the truth about the state of our politics and about how, for example, I think we are more honest about how capitalism simply isn't working for us, and there is not that, and maybe more critical of the reformist viewpoints that the Left Alliance takes, but also, of course, we support a lot of these kind of policies that have to be taken in between these steps. But I think that would be maybe the more common difference, is that the youth organization in general is seen as the more radical in those stances. But of course, we do have also our certain political differences, whether it be about, I don't know, legalization of cannabis, for example, which we support, but the party does not, or the membership of Finland in NATO, which the Left Alliance Party has come to support. Yet in the Left Youth, in our political program, we still say that Finland should actually leave NATO. So
Actually, you raised a very significant issue, and actually, what you labeled your youth organization and perhaps many youth organizations in general as radical. That was really important and interesting for me. I would like to follow up with a general question about Finland. I used to live in Finland back in 2016 and 17, an amazing and beautiful country. Since then, Finland, like much of the world, has witnessed significant developments. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, shifts in government and policy, absolutely, and a rapid technological change as well. How would you describe the political atmosphere in Finland today, compared with uh, that period nearly a decade ago?
well, I think it's actually quite an interesting question, considering that I guess started being politically active around 2014. I was already interested before, but that was the time I joined the Left Youth. So it's actually kind of the time period also that I've been following politics closely in Finland, but also abroad. Of course, right now I would say the political atmosphere is quite well, honestly, bad. If you ask me, we have a very right-wing government that has been in power for over 2 years now, which I think has done um, chosen on doing politics that have been quite destructive to Finland, and especially, for example, the workers' movements to human rights, topics such as this. And I think it's a very worrisome direction where we are and where we are going. I also think not only this government, but also these big transitions or changes we are seeing, whether it comes to the war in Ukraine, the genocide in Gaza, all of these like big global issues, the rise of fascism, and also, of course, climate catastrophe going forward. I think the feeling is quite bleak regarding the future right now. And it also is, of course, due to domestic issues. For example, unemployment is very high at the moment in Finland, even though the government said their aim is to, of course, reduce unemployment, which is surely a goal for every government, at least in words. But in actuality, we are seeing a totally different trend happening, and I think that is also creating a lot of this like bleakness and hopelessness for the future, because people are really uncertain whether it be domestic or global issues, that what's going to happen, and it really feels like nothing's really going towards a positive direction. And I think that this very like right-wing talking point that we often hear with austerity is like, oh, we just have to do this and there's no alternative, and just have to like suck it up, even though at the same time we see how the richest people still get tax breaks in this. So I think people are also starting to see the inequality in these policies. But what I think it's interesting when you ask about like the difference is actually, I think the same, not quite maybe the same political atmosphere, but the same discussion that is really focused on the government debt and austerity was also taking place 10 years ago, or around like the 2015 elections. For example, we had a parliamentary election back then, and actually a right-wing government was also appointed after those elections, and like government debt was a massive topic during that time, because the euro crisis had just happened or was still
Yeah.
going on. There were like the Greek debt issues that were being discussed. So actually, in a way, I feel like we're not really like going anywhere. We are continuing the same discussion regarding debt, but we are not really talking about what are we doing with that. What is the government, or what do we as a society want to invest on? I think there is this is what also creates that kind of bleakness. It's just like there's no alternative. We have to cut from welfare. We have to cut from like our health and social work. We just like have to create unemployment. Like Finland's unemployment is the worst after Spain, I think, in EU at the moment. So even when other countries are recovering from COVID and recovering from the effects of the war in Ukraine, we're really strongly seeing in Finland that that's not the case. And I really think this kind of right-wing austerity, there is no alternative politics are creating that as well. And of course, in between these two governments, there was the kind of center-left government, which was first led by Antti Rinne, but most well known by being led by Sanna Marin and the,
Yeah.
5 female party leaders. And of course,
Yeah.
there was a bit of a different dynamic there for a moment, but at the same time, that government's term was also, of course, overshadowed a lot by COVID and the war in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
I do think it's kind of like a return to this trend we already had going on, but even more strongly and in a way, in a quite bleak manner. And I think that is a big topic for the left in Finland, and of course left everywhere in Europe, this kind of issue of how do we challenge this and create hope, but not create hope only in these kind of empty words, but actually what are the policies we can show that we can improve people's lives with, and how we can show that there actually is an alternative to this. There is no alternative, kind of speak. And to that, I want to highlight one more current uh, trend in Finnish politics that is happening. There is this very recent development. So we just approved this velkajarru, so debt break, a similar thing that actually was in Germany. So, the government debt can only be this much, and if it goes over, then we have to do certain kind of cutting from the budget. And actually, every other party except for the Left Alliance agreed to this debt break. So a debt break. So
Yeah.
even the Social Democrats, even the Greens, that are at the same time saying like, oh, we want to be a fairer alternative to these right-wing policies, and we care about workers and we care about pensioners. But by actually agreeing on this debt break, they are really tying their hands when it comes to the future, especially considering that the debt break is even tighter than the EU regulation when it comes to national debt. So
Yeah.
I think that is a very worrisome direction, because at the moment, the only alternatives are that either the parties realize that this won't work and they kind of disband this agreement, or we have tied our hands to austerity until the end of times in this sense. So I really feel like the left has such a heavy role to play here in creating that alternative. But of course, we have to at the same time realize that there is a big difficulty with the fact that now every other party has agreed on this. So of course, they also will want to delegitimize us and show like, oh, they're not being realistic. We're the ones that are being responsible and realistic, and challenging that narrative and building the alternative, I think, is the biggest task for us at the moment, not just when it comes to policy, but genuinely about this atmosphere of actually creating some kind of hope
Yeah.
for the future.
In your answer, you mentioned multiple issues and problems, including global challenges and also problems at the national level, including, you said, hopelessness, some sort of pessimism, unemployment, debt breaks, welfare cuts. But what would you say? What would you say is the biggest challenge Finland is facing today? I mean, if you had to pick just one, which would you call the most serious? I know that it's a kind of question that sometimes we can find difficult, but if you really have to give one answer, you don't have to, of course, but if you really have to give one answer, what is the most serious issue?
It is a very difficult question, but I think I'm gonna continue on with the rant I just had. At the moment, I think it would be the austerity politics and the austerity
Austerity
mindset,
politics.
because that is what is, stopping us from actually doing these policies that would help with unemployment. And they're stopping, that's what's taking away from healthcare, and that's what's stopping us from addressing the climate crisis. So I think that really is something we have to overcome, because as long as we have that austerity mindset and those austerity politics ironclad in place, we cannot go forward with all the policies that we have to do to address these very crucial issues.
I understand. Perfect. And looking beyond Finland now, the European left has also gone significant changes over the past decade. And I would like to hear your thoughts on the current state of the European left. Are you feeling optimistic about where it's heading? In Finland, for instance, the Left Alliance made significant gains in the recent European Parliament elections. And there are similar success stories in some other countries as well. But I'm especially interested in the bigger picture. How do you assess the overall state condition of the European left today?
Well, I think it is difficult, and I think we have to be honest that, of course, the left has been a relatively weak force for some decades now. So, for the most part, what we have seen in Europe and globally as well, especially maybe in Western Europe and North America, maybe, is this kind of fight between the far right or the populist right and then like the moderate liberal right. So the left has been kind of being played out of that power struggle, I think. Of course, the left has existed and does exist, but I do feel like those have been the mainstream forces in global politics. And I think we have to be honest that that is the situation where we are coming from. But I do feel like there is also this like resurgence happening, and it continues to happen. What we see in Europe with some wins, but what we have also seen in North America in the recent decade, for example, whether it be Bernie Sanders or Zoran Mamdani. So I do feel hopeful in the sense that the left can be a bigger and more relevant player coming to the future. And of course, we need to be considering the crisis we are facing. I think in Europe, we have seen the similar trends in like during this these decades, for example, or this century, where you have this like rising of the neoliberal order, the austerity politics I discussed about, but also this fragmentation of the working class. So, people not associating working class maybe being with left wing or either way, unions growing weaker or people not being as involved. Also, of course, the way we still have we still do have these very traditional working class jobs, of course, whether it be industry or healthcare or social sectors, but of course also a lot of work has become more this service sector or white collar jobs where people are not really maybe identifying as being working class in the same way, and they wouldn't really identify as such with this like working class movement. And I think that is a question for the left, because of course we are and we should continue to be a workers movement. And I don't think that sometimes you hear this kind of discussion maybe elsewhere, but especially in Finland, there's this kind of statement like, oh, the left has forgotten the working class. But I don't really agree with that. I think the working class has also become more fragmented and more multifaceted, that the people we speak for and the working class we speak for just also looks different than what it did for like the 70s or 80s, for example. But I think there is still like work to be done, kind of bringing all these people that are de facto part of the working class actually under the same agenda, because I also do think that this kind of like I'm trying to think how to formulate this, because when I talk about culture wars, I don't want to say that, for example, the anti-racist fight is irrelevant, or that, you know, the feminist fight is irrelevant or bad, because they are not. I think those are very essentially left policies, and they have been until from the beginning of the socialist movement, and they have to be in the core of it. But I do think these like non-left-wing parties, so whether it be like the right-wing or populist parties, right-wing populist parties, or, you know, maybe the more like liberal parties, those are more the actors that have used this for this kind of like, oh, it's just about these like culture wars without this material base. And of course the left recognizes that the material base is always related to these issues as well, and that's why we are also fighting for these from these like structural viewpoints, whether it becomes whether it is questions of like anti-colonial politics abroad, or even when it comes to employment back at home, or whether it be like this kind of social welfare reforms that help, you know, women with the tasks they have, or with like these like you know, tearing down these like gender stereotypes and so on. So again, but I do think there has been the issue of like, for a while it wasn't really in the center of maybe like this political discussion, but at least in Finland and I think elsewhere as well, like class politics are coming back. And I think that it explains or is part of the reason why the left is seeing this resurgence. And I think that is a good thing. And I think, of course, there is still like ways the left can even more strongly, you know, use this and be a part of this. But I don't think there is just a certain silver bullet to the answer of like, oh, this is how we're going to use the moment perfectly. I think it also goes through trial and error, but I think we are right now like seeing more wins in there. But yeah, so I think there is like a lot of these difficult trends that very many countries in Europe and maybe especially in Western Europe, which I'm more familiar with, share. But I think there is also a lot of potential at this moment. And a lot of these issues that also like interact with each other, whether it be class issues and how austerity is making the working class worse off, and how that ties together with the rise of fascism, which often is like the richest are benefiting from that, as we are seeing in the United States, for example, in their policies, and how that also ties to climate catastrophe, and how, again, the rich will be better off than the rest of us, and how that is very much class politics as well. And honestly, I think also the issues of global solidarity and human rights also relevantly tie to that as well, because then there is also the question of like, well, why are we spending all this money for giving weapons to Israel to enact a genocide, when we could be using that to actually make our societies better off?
At the beginning of your answer, you just depicted a global context in which the left is not as relevant as it is supposed to be. And perhaps in the mid 2010s, the situation was slightly different. The left was hitting the international headlines, at least more than now, I would say. But what do you think about the coordination cooperation and communication between the left-wing actors in the world? Do you think that it is sufficient? Do you think that there is a healthy communication between left-wing actors?
Well, I've done some international work myself as well too. Unfortunately, not as much lately. But I do think I can mainly speak from the European perspective, but not that intensely. But as you might know, there has been this like new European leftist party created, the European Left
Yes.
Alliance (ELA),
It's
which
a
kind of
split
like
from the
party
European
split
left.
from the European left. I think like I don't have like a specific of like is this definitely correct or definitely incorrect, but I do understand that there also were such issues which I'm not super familiar with myself, but which have to be recognized were also hindering the progress. So I wouldn't really say this split itself would really mean that cooperation is failing or it is succeeding, but I think after years of the cooperation maybe just not working within those structures, I think it's worth to see if this can improve that. Of course, we are going to have to see. It's a very recent development, but I also don't think I think international cooperation is incredibly important. European-wide cooperation is incredibly important, but I don't think we have to be stuck in this, like it has to be in a certain form or under a certain organization. So I think it's also worthwhile to see how this works out. But of course, there is always improvement for cooperation. I think it is very because we do face the same kind of issues, and also it is very worthwhile to learn from the successes of movements that have succeeded. So I understood, for example, that lately or during this autumn, some people from ELA actually went to Mexico to visit the local left party in there and to learn from their successes. I myself actually visited the Democratic Autonomous Administration in northeastern Syria earlier this year, so maybe more well known as Rojava, and the revolution that has taken place in there. So I think learning from these kind of inspiring international examples is also very crucial for us. So I'm very happy to see that kind of cooperation as well.
Does your youth organization have a strong dialogue with other Nordic counterparts?
I would say relatively yes. Of course, it depends on the people who are active at the moment, but we do work together within the like. There's the Nordic Council, and then there's the Nordic Youth Council. So we have our own like socialist group in there. We send our representatives to. I think there
Yeah.
are yearly meetings. So we do meet every year, and also we invite each other to each other's congresses and summer camps and places like this. So, for example, we just had our congress a few weeks ago, and we had some comrades from Norway and Denmark, but also other countries like France and Ukraine and Poland
Yeah.
visiting there. So it's really nice to see this kind of Europe-wide cooperation.
Perfect. Now, on a more personal level, and my final question, actually, some media sources, some Finnish media sources have described your background as a curious combination, as an interesting combination. Elite school graduate, a reserve officer, and openly communist. First, could you please confirm that this description is accurate? And second, is the attention to this mix mainly a media narrative, or is this combination genuinely seen as unusual in your own left-wing circles?
Uh, to confirm, yes, that combination is true. So the high school I graduated from, of course, now it's what, over 10 years ago, or around 10 years ago exactly, actually, is I guess considered elite. But of course, I don't think we really have the similar elite type of high school that's maybe in the UK or so on. But whatever. And yes, I'm also a reserve officer. I did the conscription. So in Finland, we have the mandatory conscription, but it's only mandatory for men. So I did it voluntarily. And yeah, I was there for a year. So I also was chosen to be in the reserve officer school. So I'm a reserve officer. But yeah, so I haven't like served in the military besides the conscription, so not a professional soldier, but a reservist. And yes, I
Yeah.
am a communist. So, and well, I would say in a way the combination probably is rare. Haven't met anyone else with an exactly similar combination, maybe. I think the media in general has mainly focused on, well, partly to the communist part, maybe, but especially I feel like there's been a lot of curiosity when it comes to my background doing the conscription voluntarily, especially since I've discussed quite a bit that, for example, I personally did not support Finland joining NATO. And I think those kind of discussions, or it has like kind of often if I'm interviewed, that is a topic that comes up because it seems like media is curious to hear. But I do feel myself that this is, even though it might be a curious combination, that it's also like I don't feel like conflicted over any of these issues, that they would be like conflicting within themselves.
Great. Before closing, what thoughts or encouragements would you offer to young people in Finland who are not a part of your youth organization, your movement, and actually to young people abroad who may be exploring the idea of joining left-wing youth organizations in their own national contexts?
Well, I've quite often said that I think, as for myself, joining the Left Youth now almost 12 years ago has been one of the best decisions of my life. I think I've really been able to do a lot of things I couldn't have imagined of doing, whether it been about attending like these international mass mobilizations and demonstrations and realizing what power we can have as people, to also, doing interviews I wouldn't have maybe thought about ever doing, but also, of course, having met many of my best friends during that, having spent a lot of like very fun times in the organizations, meeting like-minded people. But I also really feel like, considering the time we live in, and if you're frustrated with like nothing being done about the climate catastrophe, if you're scared about the rise of the far right and fascism, if you think you deserve better than just this like continuous austerity and this stealing of your future while the richest get richer, then I also think it really creates meaning to one's life as well, to actually have this feeling of agency in there, that like I see these developments and I do not accept them, and that's why I will organize for them. And the best thing is that you don't have to organize alone. You have this heaps of people that organize with you, and that's why I really recommend to everybody who feels that way to join an organization that feels good to you and be active.
Pinja Vuorinen, thank you very much for this great interview.
Thank you.
For more interviews like this one, join me here at the Left Agora by subscribing to the channel. Until next time, let the Agora echo with new voices.